everybody, welcome back to my channel. I'm Alice Takeover, also known as Alice Antoinette. I'm here to talk a little bit today about my background. I've gotten a lot of questions recently about how my childhood was and what it is I'm doing now, and especially having to do with my modeling career and what my plans are for the future. And so taking it right from the beginning, I grew up in Jacksonville, Florida, in a little rural area of town. So I like to say that that's where I was born and raised, and I got a lot of my values later on from when I moved to upstate New York. My parents really enjoyed that we lived in a little house that was far away from everyone, and they love that they can have all these little animals like horses, and we had some dogs and cats and chickens and goats and the whole thing. We had a cute little family farm to start, and it was really adorable while it lasted. And I'm an only child, so my mom paid all the attention to me. Growing up, we had kind of an old-fashioned family setup where my dad went to work and my mom stayed home to take care of me and had little jobs here and there, but she mostly focused on raising me, which I love that she did that. She took me to do all kinds of activities growing up, whether it be ballet and gymnastics, and we went out to the beach and the mall, and every time she went to the grocery store, she always took me, and I would always get an oatmeal cookie from the bakery. And so when my dad would get home from work and we were done with our activities and I would just go out playing in the yard or whatever I like to do, they were really big on taking pictures. They wanted to capture those little moments of my life where I was young and it was just precious little moments that they wanted to hold forever. And my dad used to have that big camcorder, you know, where they were like with VHS tapes in them, so he would walk around with that thing and film me, and my mom would take pictures on her little Go camera that you would buy at Walmart. It was very cute, and I always just remember like I was like doing my thing and then mom and dad would say cheese and I was like cheese. Like that. And so my childhood was full of fond memories. It was really fun, and my mom was awesome to hang out with all the time, and my dad was fun to be around after he was done working, and I have lots of pictures to reminisce about those moments in my life. But after a while, like since the time I was born to the time I was 10, like a decade later, the rural areas of Jacksonville started to turn into more of developed suburbia. So all of these subdivisions started to roll in, and my parents were like, ew, we don't want neighbors and stuff. And the crime rates were rising, so they were like, how about we take our daughter and move our family to upstate New York, where it's a lot quieter, calmer, and definitely a family-oriented environment. So we ended up making the move. We ended up packing up all our things and selling the house, and we moved up to upstate New York. My dad's originally from there and my mom's from Florida, so that's kind of explains how that worked out. My dad went to Florida for work and met my mom there, and so they had their thing there for a decade, and then they went back up to upstate New York, where I ended up continuing out my teenage years. And I remember when I got my first dose of reality, because I went to school and all these kids were picking on me for my southern accent. I can't even recreate it now because I worked so strongly to stop getting picked on by just speaking clearly and coherently. Yes, speaking coherently and clearly. So I've always worked on my speech, and I always didn't really like the accents in upstate. So a lot of people, it's funny these days, they're like, where are you from? And they can't really pinpoint it. No matter where in the world I go, they're like, where are you from? And the closest I've gotten to correct was like Canadian. And I'm like, I'll take it, because upstate New York is pretty much Canada. Anyhow, as far as careers go, as I was going through middle school, I actually ended up getting scouted out for some TV shows like Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader? So naturally, when I was in fifth grade, I ended up going to try out for that casting, and when I went in to answer their questions, because that's what you have to do if you're gonna sign on to be, I don't know if the show still exists, but back when you're like, if you're smarter than a fifth grader, they would ask you, I think, 5 questions. And I'll never forget to this day, the question that they got me on was so silly. They ended up asking me, what is the precipitation that is on the grass in the mornings? And I said condensation. And I thought, for a fifth grader, that's pretty smart, right? Well, they said the correct answer, and there's no straying from this, was dew. And I was like, you gotta be kidding me. So I didn't end up on the show. Anyway, so moving on, it still ended up sparking some attention from modeling agencies and the like, so I ended up having an interest in that, and my mom, being the supportive parent she was, she let me do some modeling gigs, and so I ended up getting signed with some small agencies when I was young. So from about the time I was in maybe late 5th grade to early 6th grade, and then moving onward from there, I got little modeling jobs here and there. I also got very invested into horseback riding, so that was a pastime that I really enjoyed doing. I never ended up joining any sports after high school because I just really enjoyed horseback riding after I got done with my studies at school. So between school and horses and modeling, I really just had a full childhood of all kinds of fun stuff there in my teen years anyway. And so the beginning of my life was just trying out a lot of stuff and seeing what worked, and then in my teen years I was like, oh, these are my main interests. And so I ended up graduating from high school, and then I went into college for veterinary technology. It was that moment in my life where I was like, yep, you know what, I know what I've always wanted to do, and veterinary technology is my calling, and maybe I'll go on to be a veterinarian as well. And so I ended up going to college for that. I ended up getting accepted into the school of my choice, and I ended up getting an associate's in applied science for veterinary technology. I ended up being the youngest to graduate my class because I knew that that was what I wanted to do. And I took college credits in high school to be able to get to that point. Now, while I was studying in college, I couldn't continue my summer ice cream job because it was the winter. All of my semesters were in the fall, winter, and spring, and so in the summers I could work, but I needed to have a job in the winter that wasn't going to interfere with my studies, but also paid well enough for me to be able to afford my horses and to be able to afford groceries and other basic things. And so I was actually just scrolling around on Facebook one day, and I saw my one friend that I actually had to take my senior pictures. She was like, hey, does anybody want to help me with a creative photo shoot, like fantasy photo shoot? And I was like, hey, me. I want to help out with that. So I ended up helping her out with her photo shoot, and she was like, you know what, you really have a knack for this. You could be an actual professional model, but instead of signing on for an agency where you're at their beckoning call, you can do your own thing as a freelancer. And I was like, really? I could go just do my own bookings? And she was like, yeah, it's super easy. All you have to do is sign on to modeling websites and let them know you exist by having your portfolio, which I'm making for you, and just let them know that you're looking for work. And I was like, huh, that's an interesting idea. I'll look into that. And so I ended up making modeling portfolios and stuff, and at the time it was funny, I asked, how much does this job pay? She said anywhere from $75 to $100 an hour. And at the time I was like, oh my goodness, that's a lot of money. Now the rates are much higher than they used to be, but I was like, holy cow, for a high school going into college, I was like, dang, that pays a lot of money. So that was awesome. And I was like, you know what? That beats any other job description. I'm in. So I ended up setting up some modeling profiles, and I learned how to background check photographers, kind of the hard way, unfortunately. And I ended up coming out with some courses now to help figure that out for newbies, so I'll talk about that later. But I ended up starting out kind of rough with the modeling thing, but I ended up getting the hang of it, and I stayed safe enough, and I had a good enough time when I first started where I was like, you know what, I think I really have a knack for this thing. I really enjoy modeling. So I ended up doing that throughout all of college, and then I ended up actually taking a break year after I ended college to just go do a couple of tours. And then I was like, you know what, everybody, it was a good time. I'm quitting modeling. I'm going into my field of choice now. Bye. And then they were all like, no, photographers. So over time, I ended up getting this buildup of messages from photographers. And then as I was doing my job as a vet tech, I was doing my thing and it was great, but I wasn't getting paid a whole lot for it. I was just getting paid $1 above minimum wage, which these days I think minimum wage is higher than what I was being paid $1 above minimum wage at the time. And then the day of Epiphany ended up happening where I had been working from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. and sometimes way longer than that. I didn't even get any breaks, and it's just the nature of the job. When you're in nursing, you are there to take care of your patients, whether that runs into your lunch hour or into your evening. And so I was always there, much to the bookkeeper's dismay. She was always getting mad at the veterinarians. They're like, hey, give her breaks. We need to make sure she gets breaks legally. But it never ended up really happening. So no offense to any of the practices that I apprenticed in or that I worked at, because they were very accommodating for what I needed at the time. I even went from full-time to part-time, which was hard because it was a disservice to my patients to be leaving them hanging like that for half the week. We'd have to get another technician in that knew what they were doing with my patients. So with that said, after a while, there was a couple of turning points for me. One was the day I finally got a break at work. I was so excited. I was like, oh my god, I get to have 30 minutes to go to Dunkin' Donuts. And so I got in my car as fast as I could, and I was hurrying out of there to get to the donut shop. And we had a little tiny parking lot, and my boss's truck was just a little too big for his space, but it was his space and there was no telling him that it was too big for his space. And I ended up just rushing out so fast. I had a little bit of snow on the back of my windshield that I backed right into his truck, and my father at the time, because I was still very young, I had just graduated and everything, I think I was 20 or 21, he was like, oh no, we won't go to insurance, we'll just pay out of pocket for all the damages because we don't want our insurance to go up, because I was still under their car insurance. So moving forward, I ended up paying everything that I had ever made through that year as a veterinary technician towards fixing my boss's truck and fixing my car. And so I was a wreck after that. It was something like $14,000 because I just made a little bit over $1,000 a month off of being a vet tech. So, I mean, today's standards, you can't live off that. And so I was thinking to myself, wow, I'm never going to be able to support myself without getting married to someone that has a higher income than me to be able to support me. And that's what I went to college for, is to not have to rely on anyone else's income. That was a breaking point. And then I had also asked for time off to go to this modeling gig was by a friend of mine, and it was for a weekend, and I was getting paid like $4,000, and I'm like, holy cow, that's like almost half of my year's salary. So I didn't tell them what it was for, but when you take time off from work, you don't have to tell them what you're doing. So I was like, hey, I never asked for time off. I just need to have this weekend off. No exceptions. I can't wait. And they were like, okay, that's fine. You let us know like a month in advance. We'll make sure you have it off, right? Well, they put me on the schedule anyway, and I was like, this is awkward now because I really need this weekend. I can't just not go to this gig. Like, I really need the money. And so I told them, like, I really gotta have that weekend off. I never asked for this. And they were like, but your patients are already scheduled to see you. And I was like, don't guilt trip me. Don't gaslight me into doing this. So I realized that because of the low amount of pay I was receiving with no room for growth in the payment, like getting raises or anything like that. There was a senior tech that was working at that particular practice for like 10 years or something, and she was only getting paid like $1 or $2 above me. And I'm like, wow, there's like no room for growth here. And as far as working at any other practices, it was pretty common knowledge that unless you were to work emergency during the night, that you would get like over $20 an hour, which you gotta draw the line somewhere. I do really enjoy my sleep, and I really didn't want to see more than what I saw on GP. There's a lot of horror stories that I saw on GP, let me tell you. So, moving forward, I put my notice in a month in advance, and I said, look, I have to go do things. I can't tell you what they are, because I didn't want to embarrass myself or them. I didn't want anybody to feel bad. I'm like, I gotta go do things. And they were like, understood. And so I took the time to train a new technician and take my place, and then I ended up becoming a full-time model. So I ended up getting published not too long after that. I actually ended up getting picked up by Playboy pretty early on. It's like right after I put my notice in, I actually submitted to them and I said, hey, like, I'd like to work for you guys, because I thought, I could do the look hot, I guess. I read online that they pay like $25,000 like for being a playmate, and then it was like $100,000 a car and a motorcycle for being playmate of the year. And I was like, not that I'm full of myself, but I could maybe qualify for that. So I gave it a try, and so I like started to step into more nude modeling and things after that. And the information that I received on Google was not the same as the updated payment information in today's Playboy, so I didn't end up getting paid as much as I thought I would. So I don't really advocate for things like publications or magazines or things unless they are very transparent about what their intentions are as far as payment and things like that. Now that I, have worked for it, so I've been published so many times. I don't even know how many times, like how many magazines. I forget the names. There's so many magazines I've been a part of, but for, like exposure, no one has ever come up to me and said, oh, I saw you in this magazine and that's what made me work with you today. I've never had that happen. I understand that magazines could help with credibility, but I model myself, and I think I do a pretty good job at that, so I like to self-represent as a freelancer, but also like self-represent in the way where I don't need magazines to back me up either. But that's a whole different topic for another video because I don't really want to delve into it just yet. It's still something that I'm processing with working with Playboy and what that means as far as like, you know, there's a lot of questions that run through my head as to if things were right or wrong with it. You know, I mean, there's all kinds of things that have come out with Playboy. There's the A&E documentaries that have come out from the women who used to be playmates or Playboy bunnies at the mansion, and that have worked directly with the company while Hefner was alive. I ended up getting hired by the company after Hefner had passed. He passed in November of 2017, and I ended up working for them in August of 2018. So I ended up being there just a little afterward when they made it into a People's magazine. So I've tried to help keep them accountable by just saying, you know, they were going through a transition period. They were juggling things around. They just, I don't know, they just didn't know, you know. But anyway, I didn't really get what I was looking for out of that, which it's like, I didn't think my expectations were too crazy. I just wish they had told me what I was gonna get paid. And I think a lot of things on the topic. I think when you get like really young women and they just have all these hopes and dreams that you can tell them anything and they'll just kind of go with it because they hope that it gets them somewhere bigger. And I've been told for years that you'll get discovered one day. You'll get discovered, and that's not how it works anymore. There's social media for people to discover you on. So, but again, a whole different topic. We're just talking about like my personal growth and everything beyond that. So yeah, I ended up getting picked up by Playboy pretty early on, and then I stuck with nude modeling for a lot of my career leading up. I did everything from boudoir to bikini modeling to nudes, and whether it be like art nudes or glamour nudes or things like that. And I do plan on making a video on those topics, like as far as like what my viewpoints on nudity are and stuff. Because it's funny, when I go out, like say I'm on a nude beach and I'm modeling, you know, just doing my thing, out in nature, you know, being nude. And people get so confused and they don't know how to react to that because they think nudity is really associated with sexuality, and for me it's not. It's just a part of who I am. Like, it has no other real big meaning to me other than like me wearing clothes. Like, this is a big deal for me. Like, I'm like, whoa, this is a whole vibe here, you know, wearing something. But when I'm just in my skin, I feel like I'm just at my most natural. So, but I will make a whole separate video for that. I would love to delve into that more, but we're just gonna talk about, you know, where I started out and where I'm at now and then where I'm going. So at this point in time, I have now traveled to well over 25 countries. I'd have to count them again, but and I have plans that are still coming up to travel all over the world still, so I'm excited to continue traveling for my work. That's what I really love about my job too, is that as a veterinary technician, the only way that I could travel is if I was like a missionary of some sort. Like if I went to low income areas and I did clinics, like low cost clinics, like rabies vaccination clinics and spay and neuter clinics and things like that. But with modeling, I mean, it's a lot less depressing. Makes a whole heck of a lot more money. And when I left the field and when people in my field found out that I was modeling, they were like, you know what, girl? You go do that because we can't. You go do it for all of us. And I was like, heck yeah, I'll go do that. So yeah, now I've found financial freedom. I've found peace mentally and emotionally from any kind of anything I've ever felt like growing up that was in any form traumatic. And so now I want to be able to help everybody who follows my journey to also be able to find that same peace and that financial freedom that I have, where now I'm able to just say I want to go to Thailand, and now I like book and I go to Thailand and I pick up bookings there, and I'm able to go modeling for not only myself but for all these brands out there as well. So yeah, I ended up starting to figure myself out a bit better once I was able to stop trying to juggle two different jobs and I was able to just focus on modeling. So yeah, once I started modeling full time, I ended up going to all of these different workshops and events. Like every weekend I was going to a new workshop or event. And so from there, I really enjoyed the process of booking booking tours and booking workshops and events and all that stuff. So I was on the go for like the first 4 years really of my career. I was like doing that like as an adult. So I started out by modeling a little bit when I was in middle school, high school, and then I ended up going on to model some while I was in college. And then once I went on to go be a vet tech, and I ended up kind of like putting that on the back burner to pursue modeling full time, I've never looked back. And I went from traveling the whole United States to traveling the world, and it started out with my town in New York. And then I went to New York City, and that was a big deal. And I ended up doing a little workshop in Ohio, and that was a big deal. And then I think somebody flew me to Florida, and that was a big deal. And then Playboy ended up picking me up, and they flew me to LA initially. Well, I flew myself to LA, and they didn't reimburse my ticket because it was really expensive because they told me to book it last minute. Anyway, that's this whole thing. I'll make a whole separate video on my experience with the whole thing, but remaining positive. I also ended up going to Mexico for a lot of shoots, which to my parents' dismay, they were like, don't go to Mexico. The cartel is going to get you and we'll never see you again. They were so overly protective, my poor parents. And I guess they had a right to be afraid because their only child, who is a pretty young woman, who would go out and do these photo shoots and meet up with random people as they viewed it, they just worried for my safety so much, and I don't blame them. But I ended up seeing the good things in Mexico. It was a lot of fun every time I've went, so I started out there, and I think the one trip that changed my life was I went to Jamaica, and it was for my birthday actually. I had been trying to meet up with this one designer for like ever. I went to Jamaica on my birthday because I took the time off for my birthday. And this one designer had reached out and said, hey, like I'm hosting a little trip to Jamaica January 26th through February 2nd or 3rd, something like that. And he was like, do you want to come? And I was like, heck yeah, I want to come, but let me see like what I got going on. And I was like, oh shoot, like I actually have free time. It's like a designer I've been trying to network with for like a year. So I was like, yeah, I'll just fly to Jamaica for my birthday. That sounds fucking awesome. So I flew to Jamaica and had a brilliant time with like a handful of other models and just shooting pictures all throughout Jamaica. And I got the travel bug and I was like, I'm ready to travel like on a big scale. And so it was funny because I signed up to go to all of these traveling trips. I ended up like getting picked up by 2 other excursions that were going to Indonesia and Mexico for one, and I was just excited. I was like, I'm traveling. So February 2020 rolled around. So like I went for my birthday in late January and February, and February rolled around, and there were rumors popping up of like this crazy thing about to happen. In particular, I was helping my parents sell a horse from our farm, and I was trying to sell this horse to this woman a few states away. And she said, like, I got word from a friend of mine who's a doctor that there's this big thing going on. It might be a virus or something, and there's like an impending pandemic, and they're worried about food shortages and everything being shut down and stuff. And I was like, what kind of horse lady are you? Like, you're like horse people, if you know, you know. Like, horse people are kind of weird, but I was like, this is a whole new level of weird. I was like, what's your problem? Like, you're like going off on all this weird tangent. And she was like, no, I'm serious. You need to listen to me. And I was like, all right, well, we'll postpone the sale. I'll just hold on to her for a bit until we can figure out what's going on in the world, I guess. And it was interesting because I actually went to a New York City tour that February, and a photographer had hosted me, and he said he had gotten this weird flu the week before, and he had lost his sense of taste and smell, but he was good for like a week before I got there, and he sanitized everything. So I went to New York City, and I was walking around everywhere doing my thing, and then like I ended up going home after, and I had actually had plans to move down to Miami from upstate New York because I got an opportunity through another person I networked with to be able to move down to Miami for pursuing my work further. Having the Miami airport nearby meant that I could fly out much more accessibly to be able to go to my modeling gigs. So from there, I ended up actually being on tour in Sarasota at the time when March 15th or so rolled around, maybe 15th, 16th, or 17th, one of those. And the news ended up saying like everything's shutting down. You have to get in your houses and all this. And so we were like, what's going on? And so I said, hey, I'm just gonna end tour early and I'm gonna go to my place in Miami. So I called up my landlord. I'm like, hey, can I move in early? I knew I was gonna move in April 1st, but I think I need to get there now. And he was like, yeah, come on down. So my landlord, unlike many landlords, he rocks. So I ended up going down to Miami at the time, and I moved in, and everything shut down, man. It was crazy. So I had all of these tours booked out through like September at that point, and they all just wiped off the board. It was insane. And so yeah, I ended up like locking down, and I ended up chilling for a bit and just trying to figure out what our next plan was, like in the industry. What are we gonna do? Like what am I gonna do? What are my industry peers gonna do? How are we gonna get through this thing? And so I ended up just hunkering down on my savings there for a bit until about May or so, honestly. And then I ended up flying to New York to get the rest of my things and drive my car down to Miami. So I ended up officially making the move to Miami, and then I lived in Miami for 3 more years. And then I ended up just kind of picking up where I left off. It was actually extremely easy to book flights during the pandemic, and it was wonderful to travel. I'm going to make a whole separate video on that topic too, because that was such a blast. I had such a good time traveling during the pandemic, and I know I'm gonna get a bunch of hate for that, but hear me out. I don't think I got anybody else sick because I tested all the time. Like, all these different places I flew to required testing every single time. And there was nobody on the planes because everybody was too freaked out to go travel. So here I was in like May, June, July, August, September, all the way through the rest of the year, and there were nobody on the planes. So I didn't end up running into anybody to get sick. I guess, and I just kind of kept to myself. They were like, do you want food and drink? I'm like, no thanks, I'm good. So I'll talk about that whole thing in another video, but for now I just want to talk about like my past, present, and future, so in a nutshell, because the pandemic was a lot. So yeah, moving forward, I ended up going to like over 25 countries in that amount of time. I still kept hauling. I just kept working, networking with brands, networking with photographers, making money, like going out to photo shoots and doing my thing. And so now I actually came up with my own model photography events, Muses in Wonderland, and I'm really excited and proud to say that it has had 2 successful events so far, and we have a 3rd one on the way, and it's almost sold out. So I actually had my first 2 in New York, and I ended up having Vegas come up as an option. So I ended up booking a mansion in Vegas to use, and we have an almost sold out venue at this point. So, and the event's like 2 months away. So I bet, well, no matter what the circumstance, I'm sure that we will sell out by the time that comes around. So I love that I started the events because it gave not only a place for models to come work under an umbrella without me being an agent over them, because I don't like to control people. I just like for them to do their own thing. But I was inspired to make my own events when I saw other events not being ran as well, because I've been to so many workshops and events, and there were always things I was like, hey, event runner, you could do this, and this differently. And sometimes they'd ask for my opinion, sometimes they wouldn't. Sometimes I'd just project out there like, hey, this is what I think is better. But sometimes, and a lot of the time, they'd ask me for my input. So I was like, hey, I think that this would be good to implement with your events. And it seemed like I was never heard, especially when they asked and they just ignored me. I was like, well, why did you even ask for my opinion? So after a while, I got very fed up with this, and I was like, you know what? Instead of watching all of these events crumble and everybody wondering why, and I just figured, if it's that hard, I'm gonna run my own event and see if it really is that difficult. If it's that hard to run an event where people can come create and have fun, and there's a good exchange of commerce going on where the photographers and models are all exchanging funds to either, get content and, or just to make money, or, however they want to do their business. And I'm proud to say that it worked. I'm so excited about that because now we have an alternative to other events where people can come and work if they wish. And I'm not like stepping on the other events' toes. It's like, if they want to run it their way, have at it. I am no longer involved with trying to help events that don't take my advice, so I rather just do it myself. And so besides the events, I also decided to open up courses because I got so many models who were asking like, hey Alice, how on earth were you able to even start booking photo shoots? How were you able to background check these people without feeling like your safety was compromised, or like that you were gonna get paid, and how do you travel around safely and not feel like you're gonna get kidnapped? And so in the courses, I'm able to like break down my process of like, okay, here's how you background check someone, here is how you make sure you get paid, here's how you travel on top of that, like really fun and safely, and then how I personally like to handle like the finances and growing your business and being able to not only grow your business, but to be able to grow as a person. And so my big goal for all of this is to not have an agency, because agencies have been overdone. They have a terrible reputation for having way too strict of body measurement requirements and weight requirements and all this like requirements. Like, no, we don't need all these requirements for things. If someone wants to model, they can model. Like, the definition of a model is someone who stands in for some kind of art project, whether it be photography or sculpture or something like that. Anyone can model. Like, you don't have to be this so-called like skinny or like sort of like that Victoria's Secret looking type of thing. Those shows are obsolete. They canceled those like back in 2017? And that's another video topic I could talk about as well, because they got caught in scandals and stuff, which is juicy, but I don't need to talk about that here. I just want to talk about the positivity and what I'm trying to do. My goal, instead of becoming another agency, because I could easily do that with Moxie Models Masterclass, I could just become another agency with Moxie Models management or something. I could do that, but I don't want to, because I have felt empowered as a freelance model, and I want others to also feel that same empowerment. And I've been empowered not only to make just tons of money, I mean shit tons of money, I've just made like so much good income off of this job, but I've been able to find peace and freedom in my soul. And I couldn't have found that with my regular job. I couldn't have found that peace and that healing energy that I so desperately needed. Unfortunately, veterinary work's quite depressing, and a lot of the time you put your own needs behind everything else. So, and not to say that I'm selfish, but I think in order to live a fulfilling life, you have to be able to find that peace in yourself where you feel like you've accomplished something more that's for you, or you just end up being this empty husk like many of my coworkers were. It was so sad. They just did everything for everyone else around them, and they didn't have any more meaning left for themselves. And so I want more aspiring models and current models who want to help push their career onto the next chapter of what they're trying to accomplish to do with it. I want them to be able to find that opportunity to be able to grow in a safe space where they're able to create an environment where it's a meaningful experience for them, not only to make money, but where they're also able to grow themselves down to their core. And I want the same for the photographers. The photographers that I've ran into are all seeming like they're also trying to heal from something. And as a model, not only have I stood in for pictures, of course, but I've often told the photographers that there is indeed a brighter future ahead for them, and to continue creating wonderful art with wonderful people. And I love the events especially because they end up facilitating an environment where everybody can come together and be able to exchange advice and give help and feel like they're making meaningful connections, and it's not just a self-gratifying thing, it's something that you can also share amongst other people in the same industry. Because I know everybody likes to feel connected in some way with other people. Like, I'm pretty introverted myself. I've really struggled to be able to come out in front of not only the camera, but at photo shoots and things like that. But even in front of people like here on YouTube, you don't often see models trying to speak, because our looks can kind of speak for itself. But instead of just projecting my emotions and my passion through the images that I'm able to produce, now I'm also able to express my full intentions and everything that I'm trying to do through being able to express myself by talking on YouTube and by talking through my course material. So yeah, that's kind of where I hope to start heading towards with our industry, at least with my own efforts. I'm worried about the longevity of this industry because things like how I mentioned earlier, where these publications are no longer as legitimate as they used to be, and the event runners aren't as genuine as they used to be, and these social media platforms are putting everyone down, and I absolutely hate all of that. And I think our industry can do so much better. And I'm doing everything that I can now because I'm at a good point in my modeling career where I can start to help promote our industry a bit better, where we can develop a better understanding of where our industry should start growing into. With that said, you can find more information about each one of the projects that I have going on down below. Everything that I have is going to be linked there, from my modeling portfolio to my photography portfolio to my events to my courses and to my networking website. Don't forget, if you're an aspiring model or a model looking to level up your career and you want to do things kind of like how I've done, feel free to message me. I would love to offer mentoring one-on-one so I can figure out what it is that's going on in your life and how you can tailor modeling to your biggest advantage. I hope you all enjoyed hearing about my life a little bit. Feel free to like my video if you support what I do, and feel free to subscribe if you'd like to see more about the model photography industry. Sometimes I do fun things too, like try-on hauls and things like that. And leave me a comment down below if there's any more questions that you have about anything model photography related, whether it be about my life or about the model photography industry as a whole, or just any questions that you may have about the industry. Thanks again for tuning into this video, and I'll see you on the next one.